Are you a fan of literary classics? Emily is a new film coming to theaters that focuses on a dramatized look at Emily Bronte. But is it worth the trip to the cinema? Emily imagines the transformative, exhilarating, and uplifting journey to womanhood as a rebel and a misfit, one of the world's most famous, enigmatic, and provocative writers who died too soon at the age of 30. So this stars Emma Mackey and Oliver Jackson-Cohen and brings us a reimagined look at Emily Bronte's life. Some of the info may be completely accurate, but other portions are a bit more fabricated for dramatic purposes. So if you choose to see this, don't go into it thinking that you're going to be seeing a documentary. I like Mackey in this because she pulls off the mysterious and brooding Emily with ease. The character comes across as a dreamer and pusher of boundaries, and there's this look in Mackey's eyes that she creates that shows us she's got a mischievous side and doesn't conform easily or well. The complications this sets up for the character do add some intrigue, but also puts her in direct conflict with a lot of the other characters, especially her dad, who's a preacher, and her older sister, who's upheld as the educational and behavioral standard. Now, it's not that Emily can't be studious or prim and proper, she just doesn't want to, and sees no need for that, especially when it goes against her nature. And Mackey's able to capture all of these emotions, which then create a complex character. And Jackson-Cohen is more reserved in this, as he plays a sort of preacher apprentice, and he's a visitor to their small town, and I really enjoyed the internal conflicts that he encounters as he gets to know the Bronte family more. Now, the struggle of feelings over duty, I think they're presented well, but also frustratingly. And I think that's more so as a result of capturing the norms of the period, where there was a double standard when it came to men and women's behaviors. So this is very much a drama. But there are filmmaking and editing choices that create more of a feel of a horror or thriller. Now, there's one scene in particular that takes on a very supernaturally horror vibe, and it felt out of place within the movie as a whole, even though the scene was actually a really great one and creepy too. But outside of that, there are edits and angles that take on a more sinister tone, creating a sense of darkness with Emily. And that's not to say that she doesn't have darkness to her, but this is more of a psychopath or killer vibe than someone who may be dealing with melancholic thoughts. Another area that feels out of sync with the tone of the film is that there are a few musical montages where actions happen with unspeaking actors. And while this does help to move the action along, it isn't effective in building a connection with them. And a lot of the time, the score is emotionally confusing, taking on this mysterious and even foreboding tone, creating a feeling of not only dread, but impending terror. Now, I get what the music is trying to do, but it works against itself and builds emotions that contradict the story at large. So for as odd and feeling as some of the score is and some of the edit choices, another thing that suffers in this is the editing. It's choppy, with a lot of dips to black to cut and then transition between scenes. I mean, even in the narrative itself, the story doesn't flow in a way that feels coherent or compelling. It's like the script didn't know how to transition the story, so it uses fades to black instead. So we may be watching a portion of action or dialogue, and as this moves to a new chapter of sorts, we get the weird black screen and then revisit the story a bit down the timeline. Now, each time this happens, the momentum and energy of the story is broken, even if it's in a slower phase of the storytelling. And this makes the overall film feel even longer than it actually is. This is 2 hours and 10 minutes, and I felt the time through a lot of it. Most of the time, this is thanks to the vignette style of scenes. And you'd think this type of presentation might actually make the story progress faster, but it works the exact opposite, creating a start and stop pace multiple times throughout the runtime. Now, I don't want you to think I'm completely down on the movie. I enjoyed the acting, as I'd mentioned, and then the cinematography. It's actually one of the bright spots in this, with a lot of the characters framed in ways that capture the intensity in their expressions. And many times the characters are placed into the center of the frame, so they gaze directly into the camera. And it is unsettling a bit, and mostly because it's just hard to determine the overall tone of the film that it wants to take on. But it's still a beautiful way to showcase the characters and get us connected with them. And not only do we get intensity from these shots, but we also get intimacy as we're able to peer into their eyes to see hurt, anger, even love. And the settings are also captured in ways that translate well, creating a mood that matches the atmosphere of the town. Cold and dark with a wetness that just permeates, creating a dreary outlook to much of life. And the blue hues that are showcased help to also reinforce the coldness, a lot of which Emily feels from the world and then even parts of her family. I also enjoyed the arc that is shared between Mackey and Jackson-Cohen as it becomes a romance that we know at the very least will be tumultuous just given their personalities, but it also could become tragic or fiery. Now, despite some of the beautiful shots, the great acting of the leads, and the forbidden love story that begins to take shape, this is overall a pretty dull movie to take in. And I wasn't expecting action or anything like that, but the way this is all pieced together made it uninteresting and wildly too long. It's crazy how there can be individual portions that are very compelling and yet, when combined together, become much less engaging. I was struggling at times to continue on with it, hoping that something would click to just bring it all into a compelling story. Even my wife, who has a degree in English literature and loves reading the Bronte sisters' work, she tapped out halfway through because it couldn't hold her interest either. I think it's a shame because this has the potential to showcase the story of a beloved writer through an engagingly dramatic lens, but it just gives us moments with some great acting and some haunting imagery that somehow doesn't gel as a whole story and then leaves us feeling disconnected from the world and the character. There's sex, nudity, maybe some very brief profanity, and a little bit of violence. I give Emily 2.5 out of 5 couches. So who's a historical figure that you'd love to see their story in a movie? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.